Good morning. This is the editor's desk, and I'm here with Matthew Keys from thedesk.net. Matthew, how are you?
Doing well this week. How are you, Rick?
I'm doing very well. And you've got some things to talk about, but before you do, I want to do a shout out to, boy, I've even learned how to point to our sponsor on this show, Bill Mobley, who is a fan of the show at Freecast. So, Bill, how are you, bud? Thank you. All right, Matthew, it's your show. What do you got to talk about?
I'll tell you that we're fans of Freecast as well. The desk, we've covered them a couple of times. You can look up the Freecast tag to see what they're up to. They just launched on Roku a couple of
Yep.
weeks ago. I believe it's their fast platform on Roku. I don't know if it's their whole ecosystem. I'd have to go back and look at the story, but the Freecast people are doing really terrific stuff out there. So thanks, Bill, for that. Um, I'd be remiss, I think, at the start of the show if I didn't talk about something that's been going on for the past week out here in California, which are these devastating wildfires that we've seen in the Southern California area. Just to refresh everybody's memory, about Tuesday morning, there was a terrible fire that started in the Pacific Palisades neighborhood of the greater Los Angeles area. Then there were two fires. There was the Eaton fire out in Altadena, and there have been several smaller sized fires over the last couple of days. And as we're recording this, it's Monday. These go out on Tuesday, and between Monday and Wednesday, we're expected to have a lot of the same weather conditions that made the fires last week so terrible. I don't think that I have to tell any of our viewers that there's been a significant amount of devastation in the greater LA area and Los Angeles County. And certainly we've all seen the news reports of the homes that have been damaged and destroyed, the people that have been displaced, and it's really going to change the face of LA, which is not just a place that's millions of people call home, but is also the entertainment capital, one of the original entertainment capitals of the world. It's
Yep.
where Hollywood is, and even for a brief moment, the Hollywood area was threatened by fire, the Sunset Fire, very briefly. But as we've seen time and time again, when things like this happen, it tends to bring out the best in people. And we've certainly seen a lot of wonderful things that have come out over the past few days, which doesn't exactly provide balance to all of this devastation. This is something that people here in California are going to be dealing with for a long time. I've certainly had to deal with it. There's a terrible wildfire that came up to my doorstep a couple of years ago, and it's a terrible thing to have to deal with. But there are some wonderful people that come out and try to provide support and uplift the community when these devastating things happen, including in the media and entertainment space. News came out late last week that the Walt Disney Company has generously donated $15 million to wildfire relief efforts. We've seen Paramount and Fox Corporation donate $1 million each. They're also pointing people to various not-profit uh, wildfire relief organizations like the American Red Cross. Sinclair has partnered with the Salvation Army to raise money for wildfire relief. iHeart Media, which is radio. We don't really talk a lot about radio on the editor's desk, but we do cover them at thedesk.net. KFI and iHeart have partnered to provide wildfire relief and raise money and solicit donated goods. So there's a lot of companies that are coming together. One of the things that hasn't really been discussed is that this fire, because it hit in LA, has had a tremendous impact on the media and entertainment space. Warner Brothers is looking for temporary housing for some of their employees. Certainly, it's changed some of even sports doesn't really seem to matter at a moment like this, but we've got a game that's being played tonight, Monday night, that had to be relocated. We've seen other sports franchises, we're talking about football game, we've seen other sports franchises had to delay games because of it, but the entertainment and the broadcast industry has been tremendously impacted by this as well. There have been people within our own industry that have lost their homes, possibly lost their livelihoods. And there's one organization in general that I just wanted to highlight real quick, which we've been promoting on the desk the past couple of days, and that's the Broadcasters Foundation of America. You can go to thedesk.net/BFOA and learn more about what they do. And I'll just summarize it here really quickly. They are a not-for-profit organization that provides acute financial relief to people in the broadcast industry that have been affected by a personal financial crisis or a natural disaster. And the executive in charge of BFOA came out and said they have set aside money specifically for wildfire relief for the broadcasters that have been impacted. There is some eligibility requirements. You have to work in the industry for at least 5 years. You have to be full time. It's not just the broadcast industry, though, and you can find out more about eligibility. Again, go to thedesk.net/BFOA. There's also a QR code on your screen that you can scan. I think BFOA is doing some tremendous work, and that's not to take away from the work that everybody else is doing, and that's certainly not to say that you know, I understand the fact that a lot of the local news organizations, the national news organizations, they want to partner with the people that can do the greatest amount of good for the people that are in the greatest amount of need. And it's just important, I think, for us to use this platform to remind people that are in our industry that our industry also is hurting by by this disaster. So BFOA was immediately who I thought of first, and really hoping that people go check them out. I'm not being maybe I'm not the most articulate spokesperson for them, but the story that we wrote on the way is that they're trying to help people in our industry, I think really speaks for itself. So please go check that out. And just to wrap things up, um, anytime we're in a crisis like this, it really highlights the importance of our local news industry, and that transcends television. Television certainly is how we get our first pictures of what's going on. They are the boots on the ground. But when you load up your car and you're evacuating, you're probably not watching television while you're driving to get information. You're probably listening to the radio. And I don't think anybody has done a better job than KNX, the Odyssey station, and KFI, the iHeart station. They really met the challenge. They scrambled their reporters together. I know there are people that are working without paychecks right now that have lost a lot of sleep over the past few days, but there's nowhere else
People
to go.
working without homes.
That's right. That's right. And in some cases, working without offices because the offices have been evacuated.
Right.
Fox Sports Radio had to evacuate their studios the other day because they had a fire that was coming close to them, and the newspapers too. This is something where our industry is highly competitive, and that transcends companies. It's now platforms too. But in times like this, your local news outlets, they've just been doing a fantastic job. I personally have been watching a lot of coverage from KTLA, but also flipping through the channels, and all of them for a solid 72 hours straight went wall to wall with fire coverage, commercial free, which means they're losing money covering it, but they are committing a tremendous public service, as we've grown to expect that they would. But sometimes we take a little bit of advantage of that. We take it for granted, is what I meant to say.
Yeah.
And we shouldn't. We really shouldn't. So that's really why I wanted to bring up the BFOA, because these people who are out there on the front lines, getting out the information that is so critical to the community. This is one of those moments where they are also personally impacted by it. And as you pointed out, some of them have lost their homes, some of them have lost their workplaces. And so to our viewers, please go check out BFOA. If anything, ideally donate, but if anything, just go check them out because they are doing fantastic work that is deserving of your attention. And again, it's thedesk.net/BFOA, or scan the QR code on your screen.
Thank you. Okay, now I wanted to add one observation to that. I did see on a news report last night, they talked about how insanely fast this fire can spread, and a guy held up an ember the size of my fist, and he said this thing exploded from a tree and flew 400 yards down the street to an area that wasn't previously on fire and started a fire down there.
Wow.
It's just insane.
We're not telling anybody that people in LA don't already know. They certainly have the Santa Ana winds. We have something very similar out in Sacramento called the Delta Breeze. And boy, when those winds kick up, people think that the fires spread because they're catching nearby vegetation or structures or other
Oh,
items on fire. And that's true, but as you pointed out, the wind can carry those embers, and that really causes more damage than
yeah.
maybe even just the spread. That causes them to spread more than anything. And we're looking at another event like this um, happening today from Monday to Wednesday. And hopefully by the time you're watching this, we're on the other side of it and nothing, came of it. But certainly there were warnings last week and the week before that what could happen in LA, uh, might happen. And unfortunately, the worst case scenario was the one that played out. And you're right but that kind of explanatory reporting really drives home what's going on there.
Yeah.
And if it wasn't for our local broadcasters, our local newspapers, our not-for-profit newsrooms there too, because I think the public stations out there have been doing a phenomenal job as well. LAist and Southern California Public Media, or I'm not entirely sure what if they might be one and the same now. Um, Everybody really jumps on board to do what they need to do to inform the community. The term disaster porn gets thrown out a lot, right, around this time. And certainly there's a little bit of that going on. Um, but I'll tell you that when a disaster hits anywhere, one of the things that, I've been known for years was breaking news on social media, and specifically on Twitter, because it's the real-time feed for things like this. And the reason why I was able to break news so quickly 10 years ago when I did that for a living is because I never forgot that the people that get the news first tend to be the people that are in those local communities. It's the local newsrooms, it's the local television stations, the radio stations, the newspapers.
Yep.
They are first. It's oftentimes not the national guys. Although not always, sometimes they do, but for the most part, it's the local reporters first. They are often among the least paid in our industry. They're often the least recognized, but they typically have the greatest impact. And as an industry, there's going to be a time where we need to have a conversation about whether or not that changes, especially as we see more of these newsrooms consolidating and closing. I think what LA has proven is that there's more of a need for it now than ever. LA has the benefit of being in a market where most of the entertainment companies own the local stations. Not all of them, but most of them. And the newspapers, certainly the main newspaper there is owned by someone who has deep pockets. But in a lot of these communities, that's not the case. In my community, that wasn't the case. But it was me and the local broadcasters and the local newspaper who were out there on the front lines telling people where they needed to go, where they should avoid, how they could rebuild. There are still parts, 4 years later, there are still parts of my town that are not rebuilt. There were 300 homes that were destroyed. It was the 11th most destructive fire in California state history, and that's probably going to be displaced by what's going on in Southern California.
Yeah.
And I just, that's why I think that the BFOA, the work that they do is so important, because oftentimes we forget that local broadcasters and local journalists are part of the communities that they cover. And when things like this happen, they are affected by it too. But they have to put aside the fact that they're affected by it to do their job. And does that mean they should earn some kind of hero's medal for it? No, maybe not. But does that mean that they are as deserving of help as everyone else? I think that's true. I think so. So yeah, I appreciate that you brought that up, because that is a terrific example of a reporter uh, really explaining the situation in a way that is very relatable to people who
Yeah.
may not be from California. Just last week, and I hope you don't mind me sharing this, but just last week in our pre-interview, in our pre-show, you were talking about how you had to shovel snow out of your driveway, right? And it's just wild to think that on one side of the country they're dealing with snow, and on our side of the country we're dealing with fire.
Yeah.
You know, and so I think sometimes when you're not here, it can be very easy to miss. that people are going through pain. There are still people, months ago that went through this situation in Florida, the hurricanes in Florida,
Yep.
that are still dealing with it, and they will be for a long time. And so please keep those people in your thoughts. If you're someone who prays, keep them in your prayers. But also try to do something substantive that can help. Not that those things don't help; they very much do. But hopefully, find the encouragement and the motivation to donate your money if you can, donate your time if you can't, donate even awareness. Help spread the good word as we're doing here today.
Very
So
good. Very good.
on
Okay.
that
Now,
on that note,
on that note, now, by the way, at this point, we'll do the transition as my wife's mother used to refer to me as the stupid American businessman. Um, there is some business to talk about, and some things that happened last week that may or may not impact our industry as much as it appeared they might have last week. So, the big story last week was Fubo and Disney, and that now has changed a bit. So, what's going on, bud?
yeah, I didn't think we'd be talking about this for a second week in a row, but there was more to the story than maybe we realized back then, and even the stakeholders involved realized back then. So, our viewers will probably remember last week when I said that Disney coming in and acquiring Fubo's pay TV business, or agreeing to merge their pay TV business with Fubo, really cleared the way for the Venu Sports joint venture to move forward. And I went back and listened to our show, and I very clearly said that I strongly believed Venu Sports was going to move forward.
And then
And
what happened?
I was 100% wrong. Because what happened was Friday morning happened, and we all woke up to the news that Venue Sports is not moving forward, that the joint venture stakeholders have all mutually decided to move away from it. And what really happened was 2 days prior to that, DirecTV sent around a statement to all of the media and entertainment reporters saying, hey, guess what? 2 days ago, we filed in the court docket on the Venue Sports case that's now dismissed letters that strongly indicated we might try to revive that legal challenge. Now, we had discussed in our prior show, and
Yep.
I had said in our prior show, that there were certain things in the distribution terms with Disney that really restrained certain pay TV operators from filing legal challenges painting Disney's uh, carriage agreements as anti-competitive, which was really the foundation of the Venue Sports antitrust case that is now resolved. Um, However, the letters that were filed in court and the subsequent stories that came out afterward, including from my own reporting, which I had sources that said that they were strongly looking at different avenues of trying to revive that lawsuit or a similar lawsuit, basically
Yep.
carrying, taking the baton that Fubo decided to drop and continuing the race.
Yep.
Disney and the other joint ventures stakeholders looked at this and said, "This is too much of a headache. This really isn't part of our
Or business.
plan, yeah, of our
Yeah.
core business, and we're good. We're not going to move forward with Venue Sports at all." So this raises even more questions than we had before. But I'm curious what your thoughts on Disney and Fox and Warner Brothers deciding not to move forward with Venue Sports. What does that mean to you?
Well, for me, Warner Brothers is, and this is an unfortunate phrase to use today, but I think they're in a fire sale mode. They have desperate needs for cash for, I think, remaining $44 billion worth of debt. Maybe it's down to 43 now. Um, they have desperate need for cash. They don't have a whole lot of properties that have true equity value. And I felt that the venue thing was their somewhat desperate attempt to create something that had value for resale. I think I said last week that what I saw coming out of Fubo is an opening of some of the gates of stuff moving around. Okay. That the M&A world would say, there's something to do. And I have to remind myself that there's a lot of lost sheep out there in the streaming world, both sports and non-sports. A lot of lost sheep looking for a pasture. Not a pastor, a pasture or a shepherd, possibly. And it seemed that the Fubo deal would say, there's stuff out there. Let's start looking at it. I don't honestly think the venue closure impacts my assumption about what Fubo could start. I think, in point of fact, the venue closure simply says, okay, Warner, you got to go look somewhere else. Disney, write that off and go pay attention to something else in there. I personally, I don't think the venue closure does anything more than just cleans up a messy corner of the sports TV distribution business. It was a mess when it started, and it was a mess when it finished, and I almost can say, sorry guys, good riddance.
I tend to agree with you. I think that the venue sports was always messy from the get-go. I think that I've long said that while there are certain parts of Fubo's business to be very critical on, I don't think the lawsuit was one of them. I think they had a very solid legal argument. I think the fact that the judge seemed to agree with them in principle during the debate over the injunction, which prevented venue sports from launching in August, and the fact that they had, the DOJ came out and
By the way, interject one thing.
Sure.
It might have been the best thing that happened to the venue sports partners that they didn't launch.
I think that's probably right.
In terms of money out of the pocket.
But given that the broadcasters, those three broadcasters for years had forced distribution deals on cable and satellite companies that didn't necessarily want to carry entertainment, didn't really want to carry news, and they've only slowly gotten some concessions, not to the degree that they'd like, but have slowly gotten concessions over the years that allow them to kind of drop, freeform, which I don't think is real to Disney's business either, or FXM, which, all of these channels at some point might go away anyway. Not the core channels, and certainly not the sports inclusive ones, but a lot of these kind of, channels that don't really seem to have any direction, probably aren't making a whole lot of money, but they get distribution fees. We talked a little bit about it, which is, who's really watching TBS or TNT for anything other than sports. I don't know that very many people are. It's probably more background than anything. But one of the interesting things that came out of all of this, right? And to just continue my thought on the legal thing, I think that Fubo was clearly going to win that case if they had pressed ahead with it. I think that if Fubo hadn't brought the case, somebody else would have. And I think that all of these JV participants last week took a step back, looked at what was going on, and went, is Venue Sports really going to do anything for our company? Is it more of a headache than it's worth? And the answer to that was no. But one of the things that kind of flew under the radar last week, that I noticed from the Wall Street Journal's report on the Venue Sports mess, is that Disney is coming out with a D2C service for the ESPN cable networks. They have talked about this. That is still going forward. Warner Brothers has Max. They have the BR Live add-on through Max. They are going to start charging for that at some point. They were supposed to 2 years ago. Right now it's free to anybody that just has the premium version of Max. And so that's where their sports lives, on streaming. Fox is the outlier. They do not. Their executives for years have talked about the value of the cable and satellite bundle. They think that drives better return on their investment in sports. But one of the things that the Journal reported that, again, flew under the radar is, according to their sources, Fox has talked about internally developing a D2C product that delivers at least their sports programming over the top. Right now, they've got Tubi, which is free. They don't really offer a lot of premium sports through Tubi. They offer some live sports through it. I think the NBA G League was probably their biggest sports deal specific to Tubi. And of course, they offer the WNBA games through ION, and they have a bunch of linear channel partners. But the fact that Fox might come in and develop its own, or it sounds like they are coming in and developing their own D2C service. I had not heard that be
Right.
reported from anybody that I regularly talk with at Fox, but I would not doubt the journal's reporting on that. Fox coming in with their own premium D2C service. Keep in mind that Venu Sports on paper was a subsidiary of Fox. It was a joint venture that all three participated in and put money in and put effort into, but
Right.
on paper it was a subsidiary of Fox. So does Fox now take the remains of Venu Sports, hire up all of the executives and say, okay, Disney's out of the picture now, Warner Brothers is out of the picture now. Go build me a premium D2C product that we can launch. Maybe we launch it under the Venu Sports name. I think if they're smart, they won't. They'll stay away from it.
Yep.
I think that the Venu Sports brand, I think, is damaged goods at this point. Um, how does that wind up looking? So, Fox has been so. My question for you is, Fox has been so aggressive in going the other direction. While everybody's putting sports on streaming, right, and trying to make those businesses work, and so far they haven't really worked from a financial standpoint. Fox has gone the other way and said, Fox network broadcast, right? That's got the greatest reach. Our cable networks are part of our distribution fees that we charge for Fox News. We can include Fox Sports 1 in there. Now, according to the Journal, they're talking about getting into D2C premium sports. Is that smart?
I think when it comes to sports, I agree with the people who focus on the teams and the leagues who
Mhm.
are, and we mentioned this last week, who need to have as much scale as possible. Fact of the matter is, if I'm a casual fan of the Orioles,
Mhm.
um, I'm not going to work all that hard to go find the Orioles games that are occasionally on Prime and occasionally on Netflix and occasionally on Apple and God knows where all else. And a lot of them are on a local regional sports network. Okay. If I'm a dedicated fan, I'm going to work hard to do that.
Mhm.
But if I'm a casual fan, I'm not. And we appear to have lost track of the fact that the business is critically dependent on the scale that only the casual fans can bring in. Not everybody's going to jump through hoops to find the games. And if
Right.
they're not finding the games, we're not getting the advertising, we're not getting the fans, we're not getting the opportunities to sell merchandise about those teams. And if sports becomes a world like a pre-streaming HBO premium service as big as they were, they had maybe one third of cable subscribers. If that's all you get out of professional sports, I think it kills professional sports. It's got to have scale to survive. And scale has to be tied to folks like Fox saying, you know what, we're going to do everything we can to get in front of as many people as possible. And I think we're forgetting, I think we're going to come back to it because people are going to
Mhm.
go, oh my God, I don't have enough. I don't have the numbers. I think even NFL is down marginally, but I think even NFL is down this year.
Yeah, it what
It's
it
going to
what
bite us in the behind pretty hard.
there's been a lot of discussions about NBA being down, which is unusual because there's a lot of
It tends
reasons
to
why
skew young, right? You figure those those
yeah,
those fans are going to find the games. Yeah.
there's a lot of reasons why NBA is not pulling in the ratings that it used to. I don't know that scale and distribution is a big factor in it, but I think it plays a role in it. But what you've described to me, your comments very much made me think of the music industry, where for years the product was the album, and musicians could depend on album sales, and then iTunes came in, and that gave way to Spotify, and even before iTunes, there was Napster, which just allowed anybody to kind of steal the album for free. Um, and musicians had this moment where they realized that the album is a promotional tool for everything else, for the other
Yeah.
bigger margin parts of their business. So the tours, the ticket sales for the tours, the merchandise, um, the fan experiences, the VIP tickets. And what you're describing to me is it sounds very much like the same kind of economic model where it's like the sport creates the fandom and the leagues can take advantage of that with merchandise sales, with ticket sales, with fan experiences. But they can't do that if they don't have the fans, and they can't generate the fan base or maintain the fan base if they don't have reach. And the more they make it difficult for people to find the games, the harder it is to maintain those fan bases, to build a fan base and
Yeah.
maintain a fan base,
Yeah.
because now you're making the thing that people really want to watch that much more difficult to find or stay on top of. And it may not necessarily be a money thing. It could just be a, how do I find this game? I'll pay whatever I want, but how do I find it?
Yeah.
And the inconvenience of having to switch apps, of having to sign up for 5 or 6 different services just to stay on top of a team. The NFL probably does that better than anybody else because they've always said, and they still say, and they will say this for at least the next, 5 or 6 years, however long the current TV contract is, your local team will always be on free broadcast TV somewhere. Even
Yep.
if it's on Prime, it will always be on the. And now, if you're
In your local market. That's right.
if you're a Baltimore Ravens fan,
It's
which
always going to be somewhere on broadcast television in
but
Baltimore,
here's the catch. So we're in the San Francisco 49ers market, right?
right?
So when a game is on Prime, Thursday Night Football is on Prime, KTVU, our local Fox station in San Francisco, our Fox O&O in San Francisco, they air those games.
Yep.
There's a huge 49ers fan base in Sacramento, but because we're not in the immediate TV market, we don't get those games. So there are still limitations to the NFL's rule of in market, it's on broadcast TV so that the local fans can stay on top of it. Well, guess what? We're local fans because we don't have another NFL franchise in Northern California. Our Raiders moved to Vegas. So the Niners are it as far as a local team. But if you live in the Chico Redding market, if you live in the Fresno Visalia market, which might actually be served by the SoCal teams, if you live in the Sacramento market, the Eureka market, you don't get access to those games. And that I think is a major oversight in these TV deals, because now what that says is if you live in San Francisco, you're important enough to keep those games on broadcast TV. You can always follow the Niners on free TV wherever you go. But if you live here, you got to go pay for Prime. Well, guess what? There's millions of people in these other TV markets. Why would you not make them available on free TV here? There are tons of TV stations here. We have 2 independent TV stations in the Sacramento market that would jump at the opportunity to carry Niners games and would probably be willing to pay
Oh
quite a
boy.
bit of money for the opportunity to do it when those games are on Monday Night Football. We have an ABC station out here. And when those games are on Prime, there's
Yeah.
2 independent stations that could carry those games. So the leagues really, I tend to agree with you. The leagues are going to have to, all of the leagues are going to have to figure out how do we reach the broadest possible people to effectuate the other part of the economic model. And I think that the league that first comes to mind that has really done that well over the past 2 or so years is the WNBA. They saw Caitlin Clark coming in. They knew Caitlin Clark was going to come into the WNBA, and they went, we got to make sure that these games are accessible. So they went and did a deal with CBS and ESPN to put the games on ABC, and did a deal with Ion, which makes the games available on broadcast TV and on streaming.
Yep.
Really, really went out of their way to make sure that their games are as accessible on free TV as possible. And guess what? We did a story a few weeks ago that showed that the ratings are up. When you put it on free TV, the ratings are up. And you know who knows this too? The NFL knows it as well. Because right after the writer strike, when Disney said, we're moving all the games back to ESPN because we have programming for Monday nights now on ABC again, ratings went way down.
Mm-hmm.
So what did Disney do? Middle of the
Put them
season,
back on ABC.
said, we're simulcasting more games on ABC. Ratings went up. Second most watched Monday Night Football season in recent times, according to the press release that they put out. It probably would have been the most watched had they not moved the simulcast back to
Yeah,
ESPN on an
yeah, yeah.
exclusive
Yeah.
basis. So I know we're running out of time. We went way
We
over
are.
today.
Okay, so now
We had
listen
a ton
here,
to
but
talk about.
to let's finish off. To go back to my point about Fubo.
Mhm.
And we have heard, by the way, that, if you're in play, people are going to look at your dirty laundry, and there may be some dirty laundry there. That's a different show. But I still believe that the Fubo deal says to the other lost sheep that there are some deals that can be made that weren't necessarily obvious. You made the point, and others made the point that what Disney did with Fubo didn't feel obvious. Now, to David Gandler, it was in his business plan. So for him, it was obvious. For the rest of the world, it wasn't so much. I think we're going to see an acceleration. We've all been talking about 2025 as the year of lots and lots of M&A. I think we're going to see focused acceleration on the little guys in every category of television distribution, of the little guys looking for a home. It's the big guys looking down. We know they're doing that. The little guys are going to be looking for a home, which means they're willing to make a deal, which means their shareholders or their owners are willing to take a loss because they've decided we just can't afford to do it anymore. And I think that may be, frankly, that may be exactly what Fubo was looking at. We just can't afford to do it anymore.
Oh, I think, Fubo's business model had quite a few problems, but I don't know that they were problems that were at the end. I don't know that they were problems that were unique to Fubo.
No, that's right.
Certainly, certainly their early bet on a sports book didn't pan out. I thought that was a smart way to differentiate themselves from the rest of the services. And I went and I thought, if Fubo can pull this off, especially with on the fly betting, which is really hard to do given the latency issues with streaming. But I thought if Fubo can pull this off, everybody's going to want to come in and copy them. And I really hope that they do what they need to do to make sure that their innovation is protected. And so I was while I was skeptical that the sports book would launch, and it turns out it didn't. It wound up being a much harder avenue to pursue than I think they realized it would be. And they were just burning through shareholder cash like crazy, trying to make something happen that just was way beyond their scope. I was rooting for them to succeed, and I was actually kind of rooting for them to succeed post sportsbook too, because we just don't have a lot of independent pay TV platforms anymore. There was VidGo, which went away. I guess you could argue that DirecTV is an independent platform. Not that they're not part of AT&T, but they're still owned by AT&T's shareholders. So, and that really kind of leaves a lot of room and desire for an independent company to come in and do something. But I think that their executive team, and I still believe that David Gandler is a brilliant executive that pulled off an incredible media deal with the Disney merger. And I know we've gotten comments that are people do not agree with me, but I stand by that.
Yeah.
I stand by it. Um,
I
I
believe the conversation was Gandler pulled a fast one on Iger, and I tend to think that actually it may be the opposite. That's exactly true.
I think they needed each other. It never made sense for me why Disney wanted to be a pay TV company, why they wanted to get in that, why they wanted to move in that direction, why saddle Hulu with that problem. Of the 44 or so million subscribers that Fubo has, 10% of them pay for their pay TV product. That's not very many. And yet I see ads for it all the time. And it's like, what is this doing for your streaming business? If anything, it's probably weighing it down because now you've got to go negotiate TV deals and you set yourself up for liability by saying you're, conflating the price of ESPN by, cutting favorable deals for Hulu, but not for others, which I believe was, part of a lawsuit not too
Yeah.
long ago
Yeah, it
filed by
was.
the YouTube subscribers. So, it just seemed like it was more of a headache. So for Disney to come in and say, we're going to acquire 70, essentially say, we're going to acquire 70% of this business that Fubo has built and continue to maintain 70% of it and merge the pay TV businesses and saddle the Fubo executives with all of the responsibility of running this thing going forward, and we'll just let the cash roll in, I still think was brilliant on Disney's part. And I still think Fubo, using the courts to the degree that they did to get Disney to commit to merging their pay TV business and also pay them a $220 million settlement, um, from the Venu Sports situation was brilliant. I think both sides just executed a brilliant strategy. And I know not everybody is going to, I'm sorry, a brilliant deal. And I know that not everybody is going to agree with that for various reasons. And I think those reasons are legitimate. I hear them, but I just don't know that anybody else could have done what David Gandler did. There was nothing stopping DirecTV and Dish from coming in and filing the same antitrust lawsuit that Fubo did. But Fubo got to the courts first. And a lot of it, by the way, as we've reported, was because so much of their survivability depended on it.
Yeah.
Gandler was very honest in saying that Fubo was going to go bankrupt if Venu Sports launched, which doesn't really speak very highly of Fubo's business. And yet, Disney still agreed to merge their business, their Hulu with live TV business, with Fubo. So all sides go home happy. We'll see how the dust settles. And I think a reporter was saying that this deal should close within the next 12 to 18 months. I don't know the guy on Twitter that I
Why
regularly
would it
talk.
take so long? Yeah. Okay. I'm
My understanding is that's what Fubo's PR is telling reporters. Not me. They don't talk to me, but they
We
have told
have
us.
to close, but I'm gonna jump out on a limb here.
Mhm.
I'm gonna bet you $20 that Fubo no longer exists in any form by July 1st, 2025.
Well,
Not as a division of Disney, not as its own brand, not as a carrier, that its contracts such that they are get dissipated and their subscribers get moved, and that the shareholders and the rest of the folks just close them down. That
I
by
would take
July
that.
1st, Fubo is gone.
I would take that bet, but
Good.
I tend to agree with you that I don't know if it's going to be that quick. I mean, that we can make the bet that it's going to be that quick, but I do think it doesn't make sense for Fubo and Hulu with live TV to exist as two separate products for the foreseeable future. That makes no sense to me, other than, maybe Fubo is the sports product with the better sports deals, and Hulu with live TV is the everything product, which seems to be what David Gandler is telling investors, or what he told investors last week. But I agree with you. At some point, they have to synergize those products. There's and the one that's probably going to go is Fubo. It's too small. Not enough people really know what it is or what it does,
Right.
and it doesn't work for very many people outside of, a few people who want RSNs over streaming. So I do agree with you that Fubo is probably going to, at least as a brand, not be around for much longer. If the bet is that it's July, I think it's going to be longer than July. I'll take that bet, but
Good.
I do
Take that
agree with
bet.
you
We got
that.
to close this thing up.
All right.
Take that bet. All right. We got a lot to talk about, and I'm going to bet you this much without putting money on it, that in the next 5 business days, there's going to be more coming out on this story, and very possibly more little lost sheep looking for the shepherd or the pasture or whatever in the world they're looking for. I think we're going to see this all developing relatively rapidly.
I'm
Okay?
always amazed by the fact that right after we end these shows, within a couple of days, some news breaks that catches us by surprise.
Isn't
So
that amazing?
I can't wait to see what we're going to talk about next week.
Well, that's why I love this business, and that's why people are going to tune in again next week. All right, everybody. Thank you very much. Matthew, thank you, bud.
All right. Have a good one. Bye bye.